General Anderson, thank you so much for talking to Joy News. Coincidentally, before our conversation, I was spending time last week with the ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. And what was instructive in that conversation was that he admitted the fact that West Africa, and by extension the ECOWAS region, has become the epicenter for violent extremism. How concerned is AFRICOM about these developments in the Sahel region?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're very concerned about it. The violent terrorist threat is continuing to spread. It's taken root in the Sahel and it's continued to expand. So we're very concerned about that as we watch that. One of the things that we do at AFRICOM and within the U.S. military is we look at these terrorist threats globally. So we understand how these networks evolve and move. And what we have seen is what you just described is that a large portion of that network has migrated into the Sahel. They found refuge there in ungoverned space, and they have taken advantage of that. And we see that with the disruptions in the local area, the mass migration, the refugees that are created from that. Unfortunately, that then creates violence that spills over. And my heart goes out to the Ghanaians that just, some businessmen, some folks that were up there just doing trade in Burkina Faso were killed by violent extremists, just doing their daily job. And so this is the terrible price that instability brings. And unfortunately, it affects all members of the region, not just in those isolated areas. So we are very concerned about that. And that's a large portion of the reason why I've been traveling to many countries around the region, is to look where we can partner, because no one nation can take this threat on alone. And so where can we partner? What are the things that the United States can bring that we have the unique capabilities to bring forward? And how do we work with our partners to address this threat?
And that unfortunate incident has been an awakening moment for many actors in coastal West Africa who often feel that this is a remote threat. Because when these things happen, we're just hearing of the news in the Sahel and all of that. You have an overview. What's your assessment of how remote or otherwise these threats are from coastal West Africa?
So I think it's hard to quantify what that is. But the threat is real today. I mean, even if you just look at the indirect impacts of how does this affect migration, the refugees, but how does it affect the economy? How does it affect the production of food? So food prices go up because of instability in a region where they can no longer grow food. It creates crises. And so these indirect effects then have ripple effects into the greater community. So I'm sure people across the region feel these secondary effects. But then the danger is that as these threats continue to metastasize and take hold, they will migrate further. These terrorists don't know boundaries. They don't know borders. So we haven't seen them willfully stop at any one location. So I think the threat is eventually they'll continue to move. Now, I can't tell you where they'll move or how fast they'll move, but our experience has been they will continue to seek refuge and seek to disrupt. And so I think that's the concern for everyone. And even if they don't come directly into a country or an area and attack directly, the impacts are clear. I think just increase in food price is a great example of those impacts that that people feel every day in their lives.
Have we been able to effectively tease out what their motive is, or perhaps what they want? That's been a difficulty for many.
So there's what they publicly espouse. And I don't think that what they espouse publicly always comports to how they act. And what it seems to me that they want to do is they want to disrupt any kind of local governance or functioning local institutions that then allow them to exploit the population and exploit the resources that are there. And that, to me, is what they have continued to do throughout the Sahel. I don't think they are constructive in any manner. I don't see the things or the institutions that they have built. They seem to just tear things down and then extract for their own benefit. And so that to me, I think, is the greater concern that we see, is the destruction of local communities and governances across the region.
And I was asking that question because of the unfortunate incident involving Ghanaians. These are just traders, not government officials.
Right.
And the indication we get is that they used to allow them, safe passage. It's no longer the case. So it's It's becoming a challenge, really identifying what the motive
Yeah, I
is.
think
Yes.
I would be concerned, and I would not trust safe passage from a terrorist organization because, just like you said, it can turn at their whim, and innocent people just doing their daily business can become victims. And so, like you said, it wasn't just a government official; it wasn't the military. These were people carrying out their everyday lives, and so I think that's the concern as well, is the fact that these terrorists are willing to take lives without remorse, and that they can affect everyday people in such I mean, that's incredibly disruptive, and I mean, it's horrible. And to be able to do that without any real offer on the other side, what is it they actually bring?
Yeah.
And that's the concern that we have with this, and we have for several years, as we have seen. We've suffered these attacks in the United States, and it took that attack in New York to wake us up.
Yeah.
But since then, we have been working to address this threat in many different locations around the world.
Yeah. The internet is replete with assessments of perhaps what's happening within the West Africa sub-region. Civil society also sharing their own view about what the threats are, what the concerns are, and what the causative factors are. Government officials are also doing the same. But what we haven't spoken much about is that withdrawal by the U.S. military in Niger. The concern is that the numbers have spiked ever since that withdrawal. Is that a belief that you share as well?
Well, I think it was several factors that occurred around that same time. So many of the Western powers withdrew from the region, from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. That created a vacuum, and you can see that it has not been filled. And some of the nations turned to other partners that haven't seemed to be very effective either in addressing this threat. And I think that goes to the fact that it takes partnership and coordination across nations in order to do that. I will say that when the United States left Niger, it was at the request of the Nigerians. They politically we had differences and asked us to depart, and so we did. We are still in dialogue with Niger, actually all the AES states. We're looking to regain a dialogue because of this common threat that we all face. And we also have to at least talk about it. We have to at least have a common understanding what that threat is, and so we can understand how to then address that together. And so, again, our belief at AFRICOM is that we have to bring nations together. What is it we can bring from the United States perspective that can be helpful to other partners so that they can address these threats?
On hindsight, would you describe that decision as regrettable?
So my thoughts on that are twofold. We were asked to depart, and that's what we did. And understand that that happens when two nations have political differences. I think it was regrettable in the fact that, as I said, it's important that we work together, and that asking us to leave pushed us further out of the region and lost the access to what I think we can bring, which is an understanding and the intelligence and the capability to help address that threat. So we are still willing to work with partners that are capable and have the will to address the threat and bring those capabilities that are uniquely suited, that America can uniquely bring to the fight.
Are the doors shut now for perhaps re-engagement on having you return to the separation?
I don't think the door is ever shut. I mean, it's like a marriage. Relationships go through good and bad. I think we're working through that, and I don't think the door is shut. We just had U.S. State Department had a visit into the AES states. We're looking to reestablish that dialogue. So I wouldn't say the door is shut, but we're going to have a different path going forward, and we just need to determine what that is.
And you just mentioned that AES, the Alliance for Sahelian States, that's a new creature ever since your departure. And of course, these countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, are hoping that their interests will be advanced through this new vehicle. How is the U.S. AFRICOM going to engage these leaders, knowing that they're all military men just as you are?
Well, I think like any other state from the military perspective, we're going to address through the security lens. So we will go and talk to them and open the dialogue. Again, understand what the threat is, and then are there opportunities where we can cooperate? And so we'll look for those places where we have common interest. So I can't tell you exactly how that will go forward. But I will look at it from my perspective, from AFRICOM as the military. We'll work hand in hand with our State Department, our diplomats, to re-engage as appropriate with those states. But like I said before, the door is not closed. We have a growing threat that we need to address together.
It's as though the SAP region is between a rock and hard place, because these individuals out of the AES have left ECOWAS, which is the traditional bloc. So there's no intelligence sharing, no communication between these two. How do we bridge that gap?
Again, it's opening the dialogue, so it's being willing to engage. I talked to President Mahama yesterday about this very issue, and he agrees, and he has been a leader in this area of how do we reopen the dialogue and at least have the understanding that there's a common threat. So again, that's why I'm here talking to specifically in Ghana, but also as recently in Nigeria, to see where we can have this dialogue, and then what is the way that together we address this larger problem, because it's a problem for the entire region, not just for individual nations.
And I'll be seeking from you some clarity on your operations in Nigeria shortly. But speaking of President John Dramani Mahama, he's made it clear that the Accra initiative would have to be reformed. How are you readying yourselves as AFRICOM to support whatever new framework the government of Ghana will come out with?
So exactly what you just said. As this framework is developed, we stand ready to assist. So I think there are things we can provide that could be helpful, some expertise, some intelligence, ability to the intel share and analysis. These are things that over the years we have learned. We had to learn the hard way ourselves, where we had to reform our own institutions within the United States to ensure better intelligence sharing. So as that framework is developed, we stand ready to assist where we can.
What are the interim measures now, knowing that you're telling us conversations are underway? How long do you estimate these conversations will take for a possible return to the region?
I wish I could tell you. Yeah. I don't know that. Again, we have to be willing to engage and see where they lead. But I can't put a timeline on it.
How about taking advantage of some of the pre-existing partnerships you already have in coastal West Africa? We speak of Ghana, for instance. That became quite a topical matter in 2018. It allows you similar access to what you have, for instance, in Niger. So far, I understand is how it's called. Are these frameworks, a feasible means for you to try and hold back in the interim whilst you advance your course with the AES region?
Well, these frameworks are between two nations, and so they are frameworks that allow us to engage. But again, it's at the invitation of the host nation. So at Ghana's invitation, then these frameworks allow us then to have these partnerships and engagement. So there is something there that we can work with, and we work with several, like you said, several nations across the region. And then as we continue to develop those relationships in the Sahel again, I think we may see some opportunities there, but we'll have to see how that develops.
So this will only be based on an invitation from the government of Ghana?
What will it be based?
If you would have to perhaps intervene, be here for a moment just to safeguard what's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We only come at the invitation of the government and provide the capabilities that they ask for and what we can uniquely bring. So it's two nations coming together to an agreement. And so the framework that you speak of just allows to mutual understanding of how that's going to happen.
So what is AFRICOM doing in Nigeria now?
So I think it's very clear. We talked about the threat earlier. That threat is real. It's continuing to grow. And we are in Nigeria at the request of the president to help them address this growing threat. And it's a threat that ISIS poses to our homeland and clearly to Nigeria and the region. And so we are there at their request of the president to help them engage and address this threat with capabilities that America can uniquely bring to this, to include intelligence and some technical training that allows Nigeria to be more effective in fighting the terrorists.
And what do you say to critics who say it's a long game and that this is not just sole aim of being in Nigeria?
I think the only long game is fighting the terrorists. And so the long game here is for us to partner where it's constructive. But we have no other motives than to protect our homeland and to help Nigeria protect their homeland, which is going after these terrorist threats.
Do you feel there's clarity on just what you've explained to me, on the part of your allies within the West Africa sub-region? Do they have as much information, just as you're putting out here?
They have as much information as they're willing to accept. We share this, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about this and provide this clarity. So again, I would say yes. We're not hiding any of this. We've been very forward with what we've been doing. It's been in the newspapers. So yes, I would hope they would. But if there's clarity that's necessary, we're happy to engage. Just like I'm happy to visit any country in the region that's willing to address this threat.
Great to say that the kinetic approach has not been helpful in targeting, violent extremism. Is that a belief you hold as well?
So I would say the answer is not going to be kinetic engagement alone. Yeah. There's a lot more that goes to countering terrorism. There's a lot more investment and effort that a nation needs to put into that to provide the governance, to provide the justice, the economic opportunities, the education. So there's a whole litany of things that these terrorists prey upon that need to be addressed. So the kinetic is not going to be the answer, but at some point they're necessary. And so using those in the limited forms necessary to keep the terrorists off balance, to keep them from continuing to attack civilian populations is a necessary step, but it's not the only step, and it's not going to be sufficient by itself.
At the risk of sounding selfish, I want us to look at the continent because obviously that's where your mandate stretches to. So let's talk about some of the parts of the continent that you've been to. You were addressing the press a couple of weeks back, indicating that you've been to the eastern side as well. That side is also burning with conflicts in Sudan and the others. Do you feel that the complexities in these crises may have been a lot more easier for you, but for the involvement of external actors?
So yes, anytime there are external actors fueling a conflict, it makes it much harder to come to resolution. And so I do agree that those factors need to be considered and addressed. And so it's one, how do you address what's happening in the local community? But are there other factors that fuel that, then those would have to be addressed as well.
At the continental level, are you getting on with the African Union, for instance, which is a much more larger grouping of nations across the continent? And what programming are you set to roll out in a bid to, secure Africa?
Yeah, so I was just in Addis a few weeks ago and met with the chairman of the African Union, along with several of the members there. What we talked about was what you alluded to, is what are the other factors that can contribute to stability? And so we talked about the opportunities for economic investment. Where do we see economics and security overlap? And where can we help facilitate that? What can we at AFRICOM identify as factors for security and for stability that then maybe there may be opportunities for investment as well? So how do we bring that engagement from the United States, not just from the government, but from our civil and commercial and industrial sectors that can provide investment, that can help provide then stability? Because if we can have a foundation of security that provides stability, that allows for investment, that investment allows for prosperity and growth. And so how do we find where we can identify some of those areas? So that was the discussion we had at the African Union, looking across the continent. Where are those opportunities? And I think that's an important topic. We've talked a lot about the challenges. Yep. There are lots of opportunities throughout Africa. And I think sometimes we don't talk about those enough, and we need to highlight that as much as we do the challenges, because those opportunities are huge. A growing population, growing energy, growing economy here in Africa, there's a lot of opportunity. But if we don't start investing in that and looking at it, then there'll be others who will try to take advantage of that or dismantle it. And those are where we're concerned about what the terrorists and these other actors do that destabilize instead of stabilize.
Yeah, Ghana and the U.S. share, similarities in terms of political transition. There's a new administration here. There is also a new administration in the U.S. Obviously, that would impact, the operations of AFRICOM, because there's a new leadership in the U.S. now. What are your new priorities, working with the marching orders that you're receiving from President Trump?
I think Our priorities are very clear. For any nation, for any military, their first priority is to defend their homeland and defend the populace. So our first mandate is to defend the homeland, and for us, that means focusing on the terrorist threat. The second priority is how do we promote U.S. interests across the region, and that's looking at what we talked about earlier. Where are some economic opportunities? Where are other things that help promote security and stability?
Yeah.
And then the last priority is just, again, being prepared to respond to crises. And that includes not only responding for crises that affect Americans, but what can we do to help assist other partners in times of need?
Would that include, and this should be my last, the thorny issue of the crisis in the DRC. President Trump was successful in getting both parties to sit down and to negotiate, and of course sign a peace deal. The unfortunate news we're hearing now is that fighting is resuming. Would it be far-fetched to say, well, there should be a need for an AFRICOM stabilization force, perhaps, in the DRC? Is that too far-fetched?
So again, I would leave that to the international community. That's really where I think that lies. I don't think it's necessarily incumbent on any one nation. There are we can provide that can help assist that and help move them towards that peace. But ultimately, that peace has to be between the parties involved, and they have to be the ones that are committed to that, and that there's some accountability to that agreement. So I would say that's where it's at right now. I can't comment on anything beyond that.
Any final words for the people of Ghana?
So I think maybe what I should have started with is I appreciate the partnership here. So I've been to Ghana several times. I was at the Commander of Special Operations Command Africa. We've conducted several exercises and engagements with the Ghanaian military, and I've always enjoyed coming to Accra. It's a great location. It's also a long history that we share together. So I come from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is uniquely connected in some ways because that's where President Kennedy announced the Peace Corps on the steps of the Student Union at the University of Michigan in 1960. Less than a year later, established the Peace Corps with the first volunteers coming to Ghana. And so ever since then, there's been a connection between my hometown and Ghana to some extent. And I think that continues to manifest itself today in the partnership that we see, to include the recent C-17 flight where we took several Ghanaian engineers to Jamaica to assist in the rebuilding after that terrible storm that decimated the island. And so again, I think there's these symbols of partnership that we have had over the years is important. And so for me, a message to Ghana and the Ghanaian people is that I very much appreciate that partnership and that continued engagement, and the fact that we are two democracies that are still working to be beacons of hope and stability in the world. And I think that's an important piece as well, especially as America comes into its 250th anniversary. Being able to engage with fellow democracies around the world, I think, is important.
Yeah, we want the world to be a better place. General
Absolutely.
Anderson, thank you for talking to us.